Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby with Martha Plimpton from Mass. This film, Martha, really, I think, brings the concept of sort of intimate filmmaking to a whole new level. The four of you are really just at this table for almost the entire film. What was your first reaction when you read the script and realized that was the setup and that was how close and intimate it was going to be?
Well, I really, first of all, I really loved the script. I read it all in one sitting, which is kind of rare for me. And it just really captivated me. It really kind of blew me away. And I thought, wow, this seems so incredibly masterful. It's all right there on the page. There's a lot of times you have to sort of use your imagination, with a script and try to, sort of envision not only the visual world of the story, but also a lot about the characters, and I just felt like everything was just there. I felt that Fran had written something that I hadn't ever read anything like it before. And so I wanted to do it right away. I thought this is an extraordinary opportunity to work with some really good actors. I believe that the people cast so far had been Reed and Jason, and Anne's character hadn't yet been cast. But I got together with Fran and we talked, and I just liked him immediately. I really felt he was just very, very intelligent, very empathic. And I felt Guy, and I felt that he very much knew what he wanted, and that this being his first film, I didn't feel like he was trying to over explain himself too much. He used very little words when talking about it, which I think is a good sign. Not the ability to not say too much is, I think, a really underrated. It's an underrated skill, I think, for new first-time directors. And so I really liked him and I really trusted him. And I felt that we could use some rehearsal. It seemed like this film, it would behoove us to do at least a week of rehearsal. Of course, that didn't turn out to be the case. We didn't have the resources, nor were any of us in the same place for very long. It was difficult to sort of schedule us all to be, in one town at the same time. But we did end up getting about 2.5 days of rehearsal, during which time I think we got through the script maybe once. We did a lot of table work, and we talked. Fran had worked with Mike Nichols previously on Death of a Salesman on Broadway, and he had described, that Mike Nichols' process included a lot of storytelling, and just building trust and building, that kind of familial relationship with his cast and among his cast. And that's what we did, that's exactly what we did. And so by the time we got into that room, it already felt like we'd known each other forever, even though, we hadn't.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you can expand on those building relationships a little bit, because one of the things I most appreciate, I think, is because it's so intimate, it's really wonderful to watch, especially with your character and Jason's, the things that are happening in between the lines. And it feels like that's where so much of the story is told. How did, for instance, you and Jason sort of work on, making that lived in relationship?
Well, we had a lot of a really great blueprint to begin with. And we talked a lot about our history, and we talked about what has brought us here and, where we've been to get here. We talked about our marriage and, where our marriage is at the start of the film. We talked about, the 6 years, since the event, and sort of, who had decided to go to therapy, or, how long we'd been in therapy, what we discussed in therapy, all of that. We discussed, are we still sleeping in the same room? That sort of thing. So, and I think, and Jason and I both agree that that was very important. Of course, we rarely saw eye to eye on much of it, which actually is really great, because that's often how marriages work. You'll ask two members of the same couple, to tell you a story about the same day, and you'll get wildly different versions, which I think is really telling and really wonderful. And because the film is also, among all the other things it's also about marriage. And it's also about the strains and the things that do go unsaid, and the power dynamics and the loneliness and things like that, and the restoration of a marriage, and how a couple can do that, after the loss of a child. Of course, Richard and Linda's characters, we learned quite early, have been divorced for quite some time. And interestingly, they didn't read and didn't talk at all about their history, because somehow they didn't feel it didn't come up, you know what I mean? Which I think is also interesting, and makes perfect sense in the context of their relationship. And yet they also share an incredible intimacy in the film. That's a different kind of intimacy, but it's very, very present, and you feel it. So despite the differences in our approaches, or the differences in what we felt we sort of needed in our work, I think, the outcome was very on par. The outcome was very, we were very, we felt very connected to these people and to who we were playing. And again, I can't stress enough how much that's Fran Kranz's accomplishment. He's done something that few directors who've been doing this for many, many years have ever been able to do, or had even the imagination to do. And I think what he's pulled off is really extraordinary, because it's one of the most cinematic films I think I've seen. It has emotion and a momentum and a tension and a music to it that is really wonderful and really unusual. I mean, and it's a real gift to his performers that he allowed us to take his script and run with it.
It's an incredibly unique film, I think, in that regard. I have to ask about, there's a moment that Gail has, because I feel like Gail enters the space really needing, or thinking she needs this meeting more than Jay does. And there is a moment where you come to a turning point and saying, we can't live like this. I can't live like this anymore. I can't do it. And the reaction on your face is stunned, almost like you can't believe you're saying that. Do you think she winds up and exits that space in a different place than she expected when she entered?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, what she knows, she needs to do this, and she has a previous correspondence, a history with Anne's character, with Linda. And they have corresponded, they have written to one another. And of course, she's been in therapy, with her husband, and probably without him as well. And so she knows she has to do this, but she changes her mind once she gets there. And, a number of things happen during the course of, the introduction and the beginning of the conversation that make her extremely uncomfortable and make her actually probably want to leave. Of course, she realizes she can't leave. But she realizes it's going to be much more difficult than she anticipated. And I think that's true. I haven't obviously ever experienced something like this, but I think grace is a very funny thing. And I think it comes upon you when you least expect it, you know. And some people will say that there are steps you must take to achieve these things. And, you know, and perhaps that's true. But in my experience, or in my view, and certainly I think in Gail's view, you're right, it does come upon her like a tidal wave, you know. And it surprises her coming out of her mouth as much as it does anyone in the room. And it's the beginning of something. It's not the end, you know.
Yeah.
Now she can start to actually live and think about forgiveness and think about having hope. Whereas before, I think it was an abstract therapeutic notion, you know, something that she knew intellectually that she needed to accomplish or do or act on. But I don't think something she ever imagined she could actually feel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do think she leaves that room a very changed person, a very different person. And who's to say if she won't have to, you know, keep making the effort. You know, it's not like forgiveness or grace come easily, you know, and it's a daily decision. It's something that, you know, once you see a glimmer of it, once the door opens and the road is there before you, you still have to stay on it. You still have to drive, you know, you still have to walk. You still have to walk the walk. So, you know, it's like that.
Yeah, you mentioned you said something before about the many things that this film is about. And it's interesting because I think, you know, the log line for the movie is sort of often people describe it as two couples who lost a child to a school shooting, which is obviously something at the forefront of our minds, unfortunately, yet again, with another tragedy. And I also talked to Jason, who was very adamant that this is not just about a shooting. It's not just about grief. It's about hope and moving forward. So I'm curious to pick your brain, and what is it about for you, and what do you hope people take away from it?
Well, I think it's about many, many things, the film. I don't know if I would phrase it slightly differently than Jason, because I do think that the circumstances of this film are important. And I do think that they inform the story. I don't think it's the same as a random accident of somebody dying or a drunk driver, let's say. I think this event has a specific and extremely present pull, and an effect that is, because it keeps happening over and over and over and nothing ever changes. I think that that's important, and I think that's a large part of who these characters are. So I think the event is central to the story. However, I do agree with him that it's also a film about restorative justice, about the ability to change when we listen. It's about our alienation from one another, and it's about proving to us that we can do it, we can forgive, we can move on, we can become greater than the sum of our parts, you know? And for that reason, I think the film, I used the word grace before, I think the film is truly hopeful, and it truly is transformative. It's not a polemic. It's not a political film. And in the brief moment when it threatens to become a polemic between the two men arguing, the two husbands, my character puts the kibosh on that right away. It's irrelevant to her. The politics are irrelevant to her. And I think that that's, you know, I don't think we have to get out of this space of this very polarizing, very binary way of thinking about things. I mean, not just over this subject, but about so many things, And I think this film is an exploration of the human ability to do that, to overcome that framework and to break out of it. And for that reason, I think the film is very powerful and leaves people feeling very hopeful and very, very, in a way, sort of relieved and released, if I can say that. It's not a downer, in other words. It's a movie about that process of epiphany, how we get there. And that if we talk to each other, if we listen to one another, if we see one another, if we take the time, that it is possible. So the film gives me a tremendous amount of hope that I don't know that I actually had before we made it.
That's so interesting. Before I have to let you go, I did want to, when I think about your sort of career, Mass sort of exemplifies this space that you've carved out for yourself with these stories, whether it's something you've done on film, stage, TV, where it's like human connection is the star of many of the things that the projects you take on. Is that always the goal when you're searching for something? We haven't seen Martha Plimpton do like a big Marvel blockbuster. It always seems like
I'd really like
to.
I just want to say, I actually would really love to do them. And I think some of them are really fantastic and actually are about some form of human connection, because some of them are really great. And I don't have a particular checklist for anything. And I mean, man, I would kill to do a Marvel movie. I think it'd be so much fun. I'd love to play a bad guy in a Marvel movie. Because I think it's what good storytelling has always at its core. Doesn't matter if the film is about 4 people sitting around a table for, an hour and a half, or if it's about, a couple of superhero sisters, battling, against their nemesis. I think human connections at the core of all good writing, all good storytelling. And so if the script is good, it'll have that in it. That will be an integral part of it. Yes.
Well, I can't wait to see the future Martha Plimpton as Marvel villain.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing that on the screen sometime
Me
soon.
either.
Maybe fighting Brie Larson and Captain Marvel, perhaps. Who knows?
Yeah, going head to head with Scarlett Johansson. Are you kidding? Absolutely. I mean, I have to start working out now.
They'll do that in CG in those ones.
Exactly.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Special effects can help me out a lot.
Martha, it was fantastic talking to you. If you're out there watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. There's plenty more contender videos like this throughout the season. Thank you again, Martha.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.